Welcome, everybody. It is great to see all of you. Turning up the BPMs to get going today. That is Sun in Your Eyes by Above and Beyond, the Spencer Brown remix. And it's one of my favorite songs in the world. So I am thrilled to be hosting one of the fastest growing YouTubers on planet Earth right now, Ali Abdaal. He is somebody who's become a friend, somebody who I think is just doing absolutely exceptional work. And the two of us today are going to be talking about how to build an idea factory, how to build a system, a way of life, a way of thinking, a way of being that has new ideas pouring through your veins each and every day. And before we get to Ali, who's going to begin the workshop, I just want to introduce Becca and Will, who are producing today's workshop. Becca is my producer for everything I do. And Becca, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Becca. Delighted to be here today. I'll be throwing a bunch of links and stuff in the chat, and I will be sending the recording of this once we've had a chance to cut it up a little bit and to add notes in an email after the workshop. So that will be coming your way.
Perfect. And then I run a writing school called Rite of Passage. Will is my co-founder for that, and he runs the entire student experience from A to Z. Will, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, David. Hey, everybody. Really good to be here today. Excited for this workshop. As David mentioned, I help with Rite of Passage, which is starting in a few short weeks. Hope to meet a lot of you all there. But today I'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So if you have questions, submit them. Make sure to keep them broad, kind of helpful for the whole group, not too nitty-gritty detailed. And we'll have some time for Q&A at the end.
Great. And now it's time to meet our guest of honor, Ali Abdaal, calling in from the United Kingdom.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Thank you very much, Dave, Will, and Rebecca for having me. And also, my screen sharing has been disabled. So in a moment, I will commence my presentation. Everyone joining us on the YouTube live stream, welcome as well. There is a link in the YouTube live stream video description to join us in the actual webinar if you would like, because then you can actually ask questions, because I'm not going to be looking at the YouTube chat, I'm afraid. But if for some reason you don't want to join the Zoom webinar, you can watch the live stream. Anyway, thank you very much for having me here, and you guys can see my screen, right? We're going to kick off this session on building an idea factory, and this is something that I'm very excited to chat to you guys about and to be collaborating with David on. He and I approach it from different angles. David obviously does a lot of writing, I do a lot of YouTubing, but I think what underlies both activities is this thing of having an idea factory. So this is how I usually introduce the topic when I am doing my course, the Part-Time YouTuber Academy. And I'm going to sort of concretize it towards YouTube specifically, because that's what I know about. But to be honest, a lot of the things around growing on YouTube and succeeding on YouTube are very applicable to blogging, podcasting, I don't know, making sculptures, basically whatever art form you care about. Now, I want to start things off with a bit of a maths puzzle, and this is a little maths puzzle from Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money. This is our friend Warren Buffett, and I want to show you two scenarios of, applying some numbers to Warren Buffett's life. And so he started investing at the age of 10, and by age 30, his net worth was about $1 million, which would be close to $9 million inflation adjusted. He's still investing at the age of 90. He's either 90 or 91, something like that. He's got 22% in annual returns, and his current net worth is 84.5 billion. At least it was a few months ago when I made this. It's probably increased since then. So that's Warren Buffett. Now let's take a more normal person. Let's say this normal person starts investing at the age of 30. And at age 30, the net worth is about 25K, which is reasonable for a 30-year-old in the US. And let's say they quit investing at age 60 to play some golf and hang out with their kids and all that kind of stuff. And let's say this person is just as good an investor as Warren Buffett and is getting 22% annual returns. Now, question for the chat for the people who didn't see that thing that I just flashed up. What do you think this person's net worth would be, where the only difference is the length of time that they've been investing? If you fancy posting in the chat, in the YouTube live chat, if you guys want to get involved, the answer is $11.9 million. If I hadn't shown you that, most people would have not got it, that it was that low. And the message is there that the message there is that 99.9+% of Buffett's net worth is because he started early and kept going. Like, he would be 99.9% less rich than he is now. And the only thing that changes is the amount of time that he's been doing it. Now, this is interesting because, as Einstein famously said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And Buffett's story is really a story of compound interest, like, you know, decent progress, but that just happens over a very, very long time. And this is kind of what this graph looks like. And this is very much what it takes to succeed on YouTube. If you look at any big YouTubers or any YouTuber that you deem successful and you look at their analytics, this is what the graph will look like. It will be basically nothing at the start, and then it will be massive compounding returns over a long period of time. The annoying thing about this sort of stuff is that when it comes to our memory of things, our memory is very time bound in the short term. Like, it tends to decay over time. This is the forgetting curve. And so if you overlay these two graphs, this is a concept I got from Sam Ovens, who's does a lot of consulting related things. You kind of get these two graphs of like, as like memory starts off big and then goes down, and the effect size or the success or whatever metric you want starts off small and then goes big. And you kind of get this weird phenomenon where, you know, at the start, you have basically zero effect. So no views, no subscribers, no revenue, no one reading your blog post, no one listening to your podcast. But you have a strong memory of the amount of effort and the amount of pain it takes to create the content. And that's not a good formula for success, right? Because you're not seeing anything and you're feeling the pain. Whereas when you get to sort of with me 3.5 years later, where you have a pretty large number of views and subscribers and revenue, at this point, I have very little actual memory of what it was like 3.5 years ago when I first got started. So I can no longer really appreciate how much hard work it was at the beginning. And so if you ask me about kind of, hey, what does it take to succeed on YouTube? I'll probably make it sound a lot easier than it actually is, just because that memory has decayed. And so the reason people fail is that they start a journey and can't see effect from cause immediately. So they give up and quit before they reach the point where the effect starts to compound. And it's the people who stick at it long enough to actually let the compounding happen. They forget what the causes that were responsible for creating it, and it makes them feel as if, you know, oh, I just got lucky because I didn't realize how much hard work this was over time. And really, the key message here is that if you want to succeed on YouTube or any content platform or anything in life, really, it's about thinking of it as a marathon rather than a sprint. And you know, one example that I love to use is MKBHD. Lots of you guys are familiar with him. Marcus Brownlee, one of the biggest tech YouTubers in the world. He's now got like 14 million subscribers, something like that. This is my favorite video of his, and I'm going to play this, and I hope that everyone can hear the sound. Damn, okay, no one can hear the sound. Let me pantomime what this guy is saying.
And so what I'm going to go into is...
Oh, you're right, I haven't shared the audio. Let's do that. New share sound. Okay.
I have to say it's pretty good that I've gotten to upload 100 good videos for you guys over the past...
Can you hear that now? Perfect.
Video number 100. Woo! So yeah, welcome to video number 100. I have to say it's pretty good that I've gotten to upload 100 good videos for you guys over the past couple of months, basically. And so what I'm going to go into is that right now I'm going to check right now. Right now I have approximately 70-ish subscribers. I'm just looking at, yeah, wait, no. If I go to my page, youtube.com/Marcus Brownlee, just click on the link over there. I have 74 subscribers. So, I was thinking...
Marcus Brownlee, MKBHD, one of the biggest tech YouTubers in the world, probably a sort of multi-millionaire at this point, made 100 videos. And in his 100th video, he said, guys, it's so great that I've got 76 subscribers or 74 subscribers. That is absolutely insane. Like, I know hundreds of people at this point who started YouTube and quit before making 100 videos because I didn't see any growth and it wasn't working. And Marcus Brownlee, who is one of the most successful YouTubers of our generation, made 100 videos before he hit 74 subscribers. I just think that's always that's like hugely inspiring. If I show you what my analytics look like now, you know, again, this is this is a pattern of basically all YouTubers, where it starts off, I started making videos in June 2017. So you see, I start off with 9 views, and then I get, I don't know, how many views is this? You know, if 30 views, 70 views, 60 views, 90 views, 60, 200, you know, it's basically, it's pretty tiny. You can't even see the line on the graph. But it's like over time, as you bang out more and more and more and more videos, things start to compound, and then these view counts start to get interesting. And so now these days, it's like, you know, every day it's a few 100,000 views. And 3.5 years ago, when I first started with 27 views, I could just never have imagined what that effect size would grow to over time. And so really the key message here is that it's all about consistency. And if you want to succeed on YouTube, if you want to succeed on a blog or writing anything or doing a podcast or doing any kind of, basically anything, you've got to be very, very consistent over a very, very long period of time. And that, you know, if there is a secret to consistency, then that secret is that you want to try and build a system around it. And there's this fantastic book called the E-Myth Enterprise, or the updated version, the E-Myth Revisited, which I often return to. It talks about how the question you need to keep asking yourself is, how can I give my customer the results he wants systematically rather than personally? Put another way, how can I create a business whose results are systems dependent rather than people dependent? And I think this is a book about growing a business, but there are a lot of lessons we can learn from it, and from the systems-based approach towards our own creativity and our own content. And I didn't quite appreciate this until I read this book, and until I started doing things like taking Tiago Forte's course, Building a Second Brain, and David Perell's course, Rite of Passage. And now I've kind of built these systems into my own YouTube channel. And now for my own YouTube channel and all the content that I produce, I've got this idea factory, which is a systematic kind of way of combining creativity and systems to create content effortlessly. And now I'm going to hand over to David, who's going to talk to us much more about what building an idea factory actually involves and how we can go about it.
Thanks, Ollie. So I'm going to share my screen here. And what I want to focus on is exactly what Ollie said. Like, how do we actually build this idea factory? And I thought it'd be fun to take all of our inspiration today from comedians. And to begin, we're going to talk about the great Jerry Seinfeld. And he says, when he talks about writing in particular, he says, my writing sessions used to be very arduous, very painful, like pushing against the wind in soft, muddy ground with a wheelbarrow full of bricks. And this is what we feel when we sit down to write: the pain, the arduous battle of going uphill, of maybe having writer's block or deep frustration. And the way that we solve this is with an idea factory. Collect, connect, create is what we're going to focus on. Collecting nutrients for your mind, like a chef collects food for the kitchen. Connecting, making sense of the ideas in your head through reflection and conversation. And then finally, creation, to put thoughts on paper and edit them until they're good. And that is where we begin in the collect phase. And speaking of comedians, let's talk about David Sedaris, who says, everybody's got an eye for something. The only difference is that I carry around a notebook in my front pocket. I write everything down, and it helps me recall. So that's where I want to begin today. Get into the habit of writing down your epiphanies. I was watching a video last night with Neil Gaiman, famous fiction writer, who says, you know, everyone basically has the same amount of epiphanies, the same amount of new ideas that are insightful. The difference between a writer and a normal person is that writers know how to recognize those ideas, and then they save those ideas. But then what kind of ideas should we collect? And there's really 4 things that we should focus on: epiphanies, what we read, conversations, and experiences. And first, I want to focus on epiphanies. And we'll return to Jerry Seinfeld, who says, I think jokes come from a kind of intense visual acuity. I feel like my senses are my eyes, my ears, and my skin, and I just feel everything just a little bit more than I would even like to. And what he's trying to say here is that his senses are just a little bit more trained, a little bit more on than most people, kind of drives him crazy even. But what he's doing is he is using those hypersensitive senses to recognize what's going on in the world and to observe what's happening, which then leads into his jokes. And when it comes to finding new ideas, I always try to remember the 3 B's of creativity: bed, bath, and bus. If we're looking for new ideas, if I ever need to find a new idea, I just go to one of these 3. I basically have a menu and I'll just pick. So bed, take a nap and let yourself dream. Bath, relax by taking a bath, reading a book, or by calling a friend. Or bus, get on the move, even if you're just going for a walk. And when I just need to find an idea, if I can just do one of these 3, depending on my mood, I know that I can end up finding that kind of idea. And if I match the perceptiveness of Seinfeld, I end up discovering something. But then when it comes to ideas to collect, there's also reading. And the question that we need to ask here is, what kind of information should you consume? And I think that there's 3 things that we want to focus on, 3 things that I focus on in my writing. And the first is to decorrelate, to look for knowledge and ideas that aren't often found together. And so, for example, you're much more likely to find somebody who is a software engineer who also knows about computers and the construction of computers and how to code programs, whereas somebody who's a painter and a software engineer, for example, that'll be much less likely. That'll be more likely to be original. And come to think of it, that connection led to arguably one of the most famous books in Silicon Valley history, Hackers and Painters by Paul Graham. You combine 2 things that are seemingly disconnected, that are decorrelated, and you bring them together. And when it comes to decorrelation, I've always liked this quote from John Hogarty, who says, "The originality of an idea depends on the obscurity of sources." Basically saying, even the things that you do see as original aren't as original as you think. And speaking of YouTubers, now that we have one here, my very favorite YouTuber is Casey Neistat. And I looked at his videos and I said, oh my goodness, these are so original, so unique, so novel. Not so fast. He was very influenced by Wes Anderson, who's the guy here who's behind the camera, famous for movies like The Grand Budapest Hotel. And Wes Anderson developed this whole style within the world of film, and he worked from behind the camera, looking into the lens, shooting at the world away from him. Casey Neistat, when it came to the internet, when it came to smartphones, and a new way of thinking about film in the YouTube generation, said, you know what, I'm going to turn the camera around and focus it on me. And what you find is what Casey Neistat did, and I thought his ideas were just fully original. And this isn't to take anything away from him, but I think this random guy on Reddit said it perfectly. Everything Casey Neistat shoots is inspired by Wes Anderson. Everything. So what do you mean, David? Well, here are some of his shots. These are Wes Anderson shots, and you can see symmetry. You can see colors. You can see the way that he breaks the fourth wall. You can see dramatic zooms. You can see symmetrical framing. These are all the things that Wes Anderson is known for. And when it comes to Casey Neistat, he pulled in a lot of Wes Anderson's symmetry. So you can take this shot of Casey in his office. He's waving this flag. He's in the middle. This is something that is straight out of a Wes Anderson movie. Then you see breaking the fourth wall. This is what Casey Neistat's doing when he's talking to the camera. And you know what? It's straight out of a Wes Anderson movie. You can see the similarities, looking right at the camera, traveling on the go to communicate something. And then there's more talking to the camera of Casey Neistat sitting in an Emirates airplane, leaning back to enjoy himself. He's got his passport up front. And then going back to the Grand Budapest Hotel, you could see that same sort of let's look right into the camera and let's talk to the viewer, which is very different from the way that most movies are done. And in this New York Magazine piece about Casey and his brother Van Neistat, who used to host an HBO show, it says, the end products recall both a childlike wonder, love of monsters and make-believe, and a fetish for tangible craft. Stop motion animation, hand lettering, duct tape, familiar with the aesthetic of, say, Wes Anderson. And if Anderson made really moving personal films about himself. And so you see this translation, this decorrelation all over the place. And what I've discovered is if you decorrelate and if you curate a sufficiently unique information diet, you end up with a combination of ideas that nobody's ever seen before. So what else can we do when it comes to information consumption? Well, we can look outside the spotlight. You know, I think that this right here shows that there's so many things that happen in the world on a day-to-day basis. And the news, the mainstream media just covers a very small fraction. And you can think of the world like an intellectual spotlight where everyone's just always focused on the same things and you can look in other places. Who right now is talking about, say, the design of nuclear energy plants? Maybe you can go be an expert on that. There's a bunch of people on YouTube that I watch who study the economics of the aviation industry. I see nowhere else people focusing on that. And then there's a channel called Long Haul by Simple Flying that I watch all the time whenever I eat lunch. They are outside of the spotlight doing something that others aren't doing. And then finally, escape the time bias. You know, what we've done is we used to have a world where information consumption was really predicated on space where you lived. And now it's predicated on time, what the year is, what the day is, what is the hour. And what I mean by that is if you were to go back to an old town and you were to go to their library, what you would find is a ton of books. Most of them weren't written this year. Most of them maybe not even written this decade, but almost all of them from the local region back in the 17th to 18th century. And that is a space bias. You read stuff that pertains to where in the world you live. And now what's happened is we've flipped. We've done the opposite. We've moved to a time bias. A couple years ago, I was with some YouTubers and we were going to a comedy store in Midtown Manhattan called The Stand. And we all hopped in one of those Uber SUVs that you know, they sort of market them as an SUV, but they're just like actually big cars. And you always feel like slightly ripped off when you get into them. And I was sitting in the back and I just paid attention to what everybody in front of me was consuming. What I noticed was every single person in this car for the 25 minute drive only had consumed things created in the last 24 hours. They were consuming Instagram stories, Twitter feeds, Facebook feeds, all that sort of stuff. And so rather than being focused on space, they were focused on time. They were consuming only things that were created in the here and now, but those ideas, they were coming from all over the world. So we've gone with a flippening. And so if you take seriously that the structure of the internet is very focused on time, get out of the here and now. Stop reading the news so obsessively. Look at what is everybody else consuming and do the opposite. And a little recommended video that I suggest on YouTube for this is how to write a long form essay, 35 minutes about how exactly I do this. And now I want to move into the connect phase. You know, high performers, they're like surfers, writers, YouTubers, comedians, everything. And surfers, they don't spend most of their time in the waves like this. They actually spend most of their time paddling. And even though everybody talks about the epic wave that they caught after hours of paddling in the water, well, it was actually that paddling and all those hours paddling that led to the epic wave. And so no matter what you do in life, whatever craft you want to partake in, if you're going to get good, you're going to have to spend a lot of time paddling. And in writing and creating, when it comes to building an idea factory, paddling is this connect phase. And a good example of a paddler would be someone like Chris Rock, who we all know and love. And he says, when I start a tour, it's not like I start out in arenas. Before this tour, I performed in this place in New Brunswick, New Jersey called the Stress Factory. I did about 40 or 50 shows getting ready for this tour. And this place, the Stress Factory, is not a very impressive place. I mean, you look at this place and you're like, any old schmuck could perform here. It's not Madison Square Garden, where he ends up performing later on. But it was those 40 or 50 shows that allowed him to prepare, allowed him to think about how does he develop, how does he refine ideas, so that by the time he gets to Midtown New York, he can shine like the sun. And that reminds me of the content triangle. You know, there's many different ways to write. And the way that many people think about writing is I need to escape. I need to leave. I need to abandon society, get rid of all distractions. Every single ping, every single notification, every single distraction is killing my work. It is bothering me. And I just need to be like Henry David Thoreau, who in the mid 19th century went to Walden Pond outside of Massachusetts, outside of Boston. And he lived here for 2 years. And after that experience, he ended up with a book called Walden. But this whole Walden ponding idea, it just doesn't work anymore. The world, it's moved on from that. We need a different strategy when it comes to building an idea factory that systematically helps us get more out of the time and the energy that we put into life, and that allows us to develop ideas in a way that is repeatable, in a way, a meta framework that we can apply to YouTube, that we can apply to comedy, that we can apply to writing. And I call this the content triangle, and it starts with conversation. So whereas most people see the first draft, the book that you publish, as this end result, and that first draft is like that book is like the first draft of your thoughts, I say do something else. Start off in conversation. We have conversations all the time in our life. We go out to lunch, we go out to dinner, we see our roommates, we see friends, we call our parents on the phone. And where most people think of conversation as something that it's just for fun, I'm challenging you to see it as a way to start developing your ideas, a way to structure and organize and think clearly, because you're getting feedback from other people all the time. What's exciting, what's confusing, what's interesting, what's entertaining. And then what happens is you have a good conversation and you find something that's worth sharing, and maybe you share it in your email newsletter, maybe you share it on Twitter or something. And you just type it up, and then all of a sudden you see how people react. So now you're getting a second level of both certainty that that idea is interesting, and you're getting more feedback that you can use to refine what you're saying. So say it works well on email or on Twitter. Now maybe you publish an article about it. And every single time you're creating, you're sharing, you're getting feedback, creating, sharing, getting feedback. You're always iterating and refining. And then at the end, when you publish your book, what you've done is you've actually had multiple attempts, you've gone through multiple iterations, and you've had multiple people saying, this is interesting, this is confusing, this is how you can improve your ideas. When it comes to Chris Rock, Morgan Housel said, one newspaper profiled these small club sessions. It described Rock thumbing through pages of notes and fumbling with material. I'm going to have to cut some of these jokes, he said mid-skit. The good jokes you see on Netflix are the tales that stuck out of a universe of hundreds of attempts. But in order to do this well, you need honest feedback. And Jerry Seinfeld says that stand-up comics receive a score on what they're doing more often and more critically than any human on earth, even a pitcher. In baseball, he's on the mound for an hour and 20 minutes straight, having his pitches judged by the umpire. Every opinion the audience gives you is 100% accurate. And so that's what we need in our writing. We need, in any creative endeavor, to find that honest feedback that can help us improve. But then how do you actually find new ideas? Well, Chris Rock says, when trying to write comedy, don't bother trying to be funny. Just be a reporter, look for what's sticking out, and then look for the question that hasn't been asked. And what you do here is you do something that I call fracking for ideas. Now, I'm not an oil engineer, so forgive me if I miss anything, but basically the way that fracking works is you go into the ground and you find like a little rock where you think that there will be oil, and you cut sideways, you crack open the rock, you suck out the oil, and it goes kind of like a Slurpee back up to the surface. That is then how you get your oil. We can actually do the same thing when it comes to discovering ideas, where we can start with an original idea. We can ask why a couple times. We can try to explore that idea, go deeper. And this is sort of like the depth of an expert. But then we then cut over, we find a unique thesis, and we end up with something that makes the reader, the viewer, the attendee, the participant say, I've never thought of that before. We end up with a unique thesis. So what do you mean, David? Well, let me give you an example from my essay, Peter Thiel's Religion. Probably the most successful essay I've ever written. And I started off with this idea about Peter Thiel, famous investor, that he is a contrarian. And the whole word contrarian is sort of upstream from Thiel. And I knew that in college he was influenced by a guy named Rene Girard. It was one of his professors in college, and Thiel spoke at Girard's funeral. But a lot of people knew that. And then I kept on diving in, sort of like an expert would, and really began to explore. And I said, okay, Rene Girard is famous for mimetic theory, and Thiel's book, 0 to 1, kind of builds off mimetic theory. Once again, a lot of people knew that. I didn't really have a nugget of insight here. But then I said, now this is interesting. This is the variant perception that other people don't have that I can build upon. And that is that mimetic theory is upstream from Christianity. And if you follow the logical steps of this, what you realize is that Thiel's investment framework is all upstream from his belief in Christianity. And I end up with something that is an insightful idea by fracking into this idea and trying to find a different way of thinking about how to do this. Ollie, quick question. Do you have any comments that you want to share here, or should I keep rolling?
Yeah, I think this reminds me of this whole like originality thing. And there's an idea that I like, which is that, as we've talked about, there is nothing that's ever truly original. And it's just when you apply the lens of your own personality, but also your own influences and the stuff that you've read, you get to something that looks like it's original. And so for me, I found that for ages before I started my blog, I was really worried about this idea of originality. But what I've kind of come to realize is that as long as if I've taken an idea from somewhere, as long as I can apply a personal story or personal anecdote from my own life, even that lens with which I view the idea changes it into something original. And there's a great quote that I like, which is that there are no unique messages, only unique messengers. And I think with your article, what you've done there is you've actually found a unique message, like a unique framing of the thing. I have tried that so often to try and find a unique framing, and I feel like I just have zero original ideas. And so my way of trying to be a bit more unique is just leaning more into the personality side. And so if anyone's listening and you're also in that position that I was, where I feel like I really don't have any novel insights, like I don't read particularly novel sources of information, I think one thing I find helpful is just to remember that as an individual, the fact that you are writing or speaking or saying something is what gives it an element of originality.
Absolutely. Thank you. So with that, I want to pop into create. And I think that in some ways we can actually build upon what Ollie was saying about personality here. And we can think about how do we incorporate that. And I want to talk about that a little bit later. But I'm very inspired by this image from Picasso. I think it's just beautiful because it describes the creative process so well. So Picasso is doing here is he's trying to find the essence of a bull. He's trying to say, how do I show what a bull is like in as few lines as possible to make every single stroke on the page relevant and necessary? But what he does is he starts off in the top left corner by just making a simple drawing. And what happens, which I find to be just so beautiful, is the way that the first couple drawings of the bull are actually more complicated than the original one. Because this is what happens when we get into a creative mode, when we're building on this idea of factories, we have some kind of epiphany. We say, that's where I want to end up. And we begin, and things just get more complicated. We begin to add stuff. We put things on the page and we realize, oh my goodness, there's all these things that I never saw. And then we sort of add, and then only later do we begin to subtract, to eliminate the non-essential, and end up with something like the essence of a bull. And what you can see is there are really two modes of creativity. There's divergence, where we expand and we just add new ideas. And then there's convergence, where we subtract and we take away the unnecessary. And I think that a beautiful example is this cover from Stripe, where you can see for this book working in public, what happens is over time now, you can see they're sort of settled on the colors, not quite settled on the shapes. Now they find this shape here. They really begin to hone into designs. And once they land here, they're really onto something. Then they make small little adjustments. Okay, we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out. This is what they end up with. And what you see is at the beginning of that, you end up with a lot of divergence. They kind of find these orange and yellows and blues, the color with all the, or the shape with all the lines, and then they really begin to go into this. And that is how a lot of creativity happens, even in writing. So here's Seinfeld, and he's talking about divergence in the writing process here, and then convergence in the editing process. And he says, when you're writing, you want to treat your brain like a toddler. It's just all nurturing and loving and supportiveness. And then when you look at it the next day, you want to be a hard ass. And you just switch back and forth between treating your brain like a toddler and holding it and treating it gently. And then you're being a real hard ass on your editing self. You're saying, no, that doesn't belong. Get that out of here. That is not relevant. What you do right there is divergence and convergence, right? You comfort the toddler, then you critique the adult. So when it comes to divergence, what I say when it comes to actually writing, maybe writing a script for YouTube, maybe writing an article, I say, you know what? Don't write from a blank sheet of paper. When I wrote my essay, News in the Age of Abundance, I had about 9,000 words of pent-up notes before I even started writing this thing. Now, I wanted it to be about a 15,000 word essay, so don't not write because you don't have 9,000 words of notes, which is something like 20 pages here, but that's what I needed to write that essay, about 9,000 words. And then I got to the point where I had so many notes that I couldn't even help but write. It was like the obvious next step. It would have been criminal. And then what I do a lot of times is, here's a fun game for yourself. Go out. We were talking about conversation earlier with the content triangle, and you can do this today. Okay? We'll just make a game for yourself. Go out, call a friend after this, talk to a coworker, come up with some idea that you want to make something about. And in 5 minutes, describe the idea to them. And then pay attention to what they say back. What was insightful? What was engaging? What was confusing? Change the things that were confusing. Double down on the things that were insightful if something was engaging. Keep drilling on that idea. And then come home, or just do this alone. Give yourself a 3-minute timer to write or to speak into this app called Otter, which will automatically transcribe your ideas. 3-minute timer. And what you'll find is your ideas will get naturally structured, where you'll see once you're forced to actually speak out your ideas, you'll naturally find the beginning, the middle, the end. And when it comes to improving your writing, the best thing to do is just to try to bring in as much of the natural talking inclination that we have. And what you're doing is you are writing by talking. And I like this because writing is something that we've only developed in the last 500 years, whereas talking is something that we've done for tens of thousands of years. And so by focusing on talking instead of writing, you're taking advantage of the gifts of evolution that people who are just fully only writing, they aren't really taking advantage of. And so then you get your idea transcribed, you have it on the page, and then it's time to edit and to refine. Jerry Seinfeld says, what's in front of me is usually 15 to 20 pages of stuff that's in various stages of development. And then there's a smaller book of just really, really random things. And what he's saying is that when he sits down to write, he just has all these ideas sprawled out over the place, and he's writing from abundance, just like my notes, just like when you sit down and you talk and you get that idea transcribed. Now you have a lot of stuff. You can just write from there, and then you move into, you guessed it, the convergence phase, right? Because if writing is thinking, rewriting is rethinking. And I love what Seinfeld says about this, that as any writer can tell you, it's 95% rewrite. That convergence phase lasts a long time. And what I say is that there's really 3 knives of this editing process. You're sort of cutting things out, but just like in the kitchen, you have different knives for different foods that you make, different reasons that you make them. You would never use a steak knife to cut a tomato, and you would never use a butter knife to cut a steak. You say, you know what, there's axe mode, there's knife mode, there's chisel mode. And axe mode is sort of the first stage of the editing process in anything, where you cut large sections in big blocks of text. You do this in a movie, in a YouTube video, and an essay. Knife mode is you remove unnecessary words and sentences so that you can then create a logical flow, right? You're zooming in, you're focused on more specifics. And then in chisel mode, you're making these small cosmetic adjustments right before you publish. Now, I want to make one thing very clear. When you write, talk. And use talking to help you write. But even though talking should help you write, don't just write like you talk. Let me explain why. When it comes to speaking, you actually have a certain range in your voice that you can use to communicate what you're saying that you don't have in writing. So for example, a lot of us did this when we were kids. We get home from school, we get in mom's car, and mom says, hey son, how was school today? And one day I go, great. And the next day I go, great. Two totally different meanings in words, but on the page you just read great. And you don't actually get the dynamic range of expression in writing. And this is why you can't just write like you talk. So what you need to do is you need to diversify your vernacular. And the key to do that is to both optimize for word clarity and word diversity. And so if you can focus on clarity and then have a bunch of different words throughout your article where you're really using the diversity of the English language in order to communicate, that is the stuff of good writing. And I think that there's three kinds of words in English. There are words that people know and say, there's words that people know but don't say, and then there's words that people don't know but don't say. And this category of words that people know but don't say is our sweet spot when it comes to good writing. And so an example here is you could have like the word good, you could have particular, and then you could have punctilious. And people say the word good. Particular is a word that people would still say. They don't say nearly as often as they would say good. Nobody knows what punctilious or what that word means, and no one really says that word. It's kind of confusing. And so that's why rather than using good, we want to use the word particular, but not punctilious. Another example in words to use is nice, cordial, and copacetic. Nice is fine, but it's not a very descriptive word. What I love about the word cordial is it's a word that people would say, but they don't say that often, but it's a word that everybody knows. Cordial, it's so specific. But copacetic, I have no idea what that word means. And you could even go from words to phrases. And what phrases should we use when we're angry? Well, you could say that somebody's pissed off, but people say this all the time. Or you could say that somebody had a fever of rage. That's good writing. It's a phrase that people don't know, don't really use, but they instantly understand what you mean. That kind of creates an originality of vocabulary. But then you could say that somebody was as red as a Banksia, and people don't know what a Banksia is and don't really understand. At least I didn't know what that was. It's a red flower. And then you could do the same thing with descriptions. You could talk about two people who are dating, and you could say that they're falling in love, or you could say, okay, what would they say about the other about why they like them? And maybe you could say in terms of phrases that people know and say that they were funny and confident. Fine. But then something that people don't really say but instantly understand is something like they had a really good flirt to roast ratio. You know, it's hilarious. It's just a funny description. They were flirty. They also roasted you. Everyone knows what this means, puts a smile on your face. That's good writing. But you would never want to say equal parts haughty and risible, because that's just too complicated. And the problem is when we try to write for our English teacher, we end up with these fancy words that people don't understand, that people don't know, that people don't say. Whereas what we should really strive to do is find ways of describing the world that are fresh, that are unique, that are novel, and that are original, that are instantly understood. But at the same time, we've never heard those descriptions before. And then just back to pissed off, fever of rage, as red as a Banksia. This is what we don't want to use. The Banksia we'd want to use. Fever of rage. And pissed off is just a little too common. We've heard that before. So for that, I recommend an article that I wrote called Diversify Your Vernacular. And to return to divergence and convergence and Jerry Seinfeld, I think that what we should just remember here, and this is where I'll close, is that what you're attempting to do is incredibly difficult when it comes to writing. It's one of the most difficult things there is. Way harder than weight training, way harder. What you're summoning, trying to summon within your brain and your spirit to create something onto a blank page. And so this is a noble pursuit that you're doing with divergence and convergence. And in order to build your idea factory, you collect, connect, and create. Over to you, Ali.
Amazing. Thank you very much, David. Let's switch back to this, back to that. All right. So we've established at this point that we need consistency to, succeed in any of these, in these areas of life. And one way of getting consistency is by building this idea factory. And David's talked a lot about how the best creators, the best comedians, the best artists will be doing a lot of exploration, a lot of generating ideas, capturing ideas from different sources, and how nothing is really original. It just depends on the obscurity of your sources. And I want to take this and I want to show you how I personally use these principles in the idea factory for my own YouTube channel. So the problem of ideas is this thing of, I talk to a lot of people who want to start YouTube, who want to start a blog. And one of the common objections, after I'm worried what my friends and family will think, is I don't know what I'm going to write about, or I don't know what I'm going to make videos about. Like, what if I run out of ideas? And I used to have this problem up until recently. Well, not recently, up until a couple of years ago, when I sort of stumbled onto this concept that I call the idea generation machine. And it's basically a way of ensuring that your idea factory never, ever, ever runs out of ideas, because there is always an infinite number of things that you can write about or you can make videos about. And there's two components to it. There's capture and generate. And I want to give you a preview of some of the techniques that I personally use. All six are techniques that I use almost every day to generate ideas for my YouTube channel and for my blog and email newsletter and all of these things. But I want to talk in particular about the first three: eureka moments, the birdsong technique, and coal mining. And I'll blitz through those so we've got some time for Q&A at the end. Now, what is a eureka moment? A eureka moment is when you're in the shower and you just have an idea. And you're like, oh my God, I've got this sick idea. It's great. It's going to be a great idea for a video. That is how I get maybe 5% of my ideas. And the key thing about eureka moments is that we want to follow David Allen's advice from Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity, which is that your brain is for having ideas, not for holding them. And so the idea there is, as soon as we come up, when you're in this creator mode and you switch away from just being a consumer to start being a creator, anytime we come across any idea for anything at all that we could write about or make a video about, it has to be written down somewhere. I even have a notebook in the shower, like a waterproof notebook, that is for writing ideas down. It's now got loads of mold on it because I only really used it once, because then I got disgusted by the fact that it had so much mold on it. But the idea was there. I was channeling my inner David Allen to have a place to write down ideas in the shower. And the way I approach this these days is by using Notion as my home base for storing video ideas. It doesn't really matter what app you use. Feel free to use Notion, Roam, Evernote, OneNote, Obsidian, Remnote. I'm struggling to name more of these note taking. There's like zillions of them. Apple Notes, it doesn't really matter. Microsoft Word, Google Docs, who cares? The point is, when you get an idea, it needs to go straight into the home base. Otherwise, that idea is going to decay and we're going to forget about things, and it's not very good. A bit of a practical point. Notion's a bit slow. So normally, I personally use the app Drafts and Things to store things, and then I put them into Notion. But again, the app doesn't really matter. I'm just mentioning these because people always say, what app do you use for your to-do list? What app do you use for note-taking? The answer is these three for the most part. So that's eureka moments. That's a bit of a cop-out. That's like, well, you're saying, well, have some original ideas and write them down. Yes, that makes up about 5% of my content. 45% of my content comes from these other two techniques, the birdsong technique and coal mining. And it's really all a solution to this issue of I have no original ideas, which is a thought that I feel on a daily basis, pretty much. I lie awake in bed at night thinking I have no original ideas. I'm writing a book at the moment about meaningful productivity, but I have no original ideas. So like, what am I going to do? This feels scary. It feels bad. The solution is to steal like an artist. And actually, this is one of my favorite books of all time. I actually have a physical copy on my desk, along with a physical copy of Show Your Work. Both are books, Show Your Work in particular, that have changed my life. But Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon is just absolutely wonderful. And I'm going to steal some ideas from here, like verbatim. How to look at the world. This is how the book starts. Every artist gets asked the question, where do you get your ideas? The honest artist answers, I steal them. How does an artist look at the world? First, you figure out what's worth stealing, and then you move on to the next thing. That's about all there is to it. When you look at the world this way, you stop worrying about what's good and what's bad. There's only stuff worth stealing and stuff not worth stealing. Everything is up for grabs. If you don't find something worth stealing today, you might find it worth stealing tomorrow or a month or a year from now. And as David Bowie famously said, the only art I'll ever study is stuff that I can steal from. And this fully describes my entire process for coming up with ideas for videos, and stealing ideas from other sources is how my channel has become successful. And anyone else can do the same, because you don't need original ideas. I have no original ideas. You just need to steal them. Here's another one. Nothing is original. The writer Jonathan Lethem has said that when people call something original, 9 out of 10 times, they just don't know the references or the original sources involved. What a good artist understands is that nothing comes from nowhere. All creative work builds on what came before. Nothing is completely original. It's right there in the Bible, in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter number 9. Chapter number 1, verse number 9. There is nothing new under the sun. Everything that needs to be said has already been said, but since no one was listening, everything must be said again. And I really like this. If we're free from the burden of trying to be completely original, we can stop trying to make something from nothing, and we can embrace influence instead of running away from it. What is originality? Undetected plagiarism. Again, speaks to the power of stealing ideas, citing your sources, and kind of putting your own spin on them. But again, I have no original ideas. My YouTube channel has been making 2 or 3 videos a week for the last 3.5 years, and we've got like another 200 video ideas in Notion that we're in the process of creating. You don't need original ideas to be successful in this kind of creator space, or to be successful in whatever you do. And there's a method that I just semi-jokingly refer to as the birdsong technique for doing this. Now, what is the birdsong technique? The birdsong technique is the idea that if, like, we all walk around, and if you're in a nice place, you might hear the sound of the birds. But for most of us, me included, you just think, oh, the birds are chirping. That's kind of nice. But there are some people who make it a point to study birdsong, and apparently, once you've done a little bit of practice with this, you can actually identify what the different birds are by their song. And then, now that you've unlocked this aspect of your brain, now when you hear birdsong, it's not like random ass birds are singing. It's more like, oh, there's a robin over there, and a sparrow over there, and a crow over there, and I'm running out of birds that I can name. But you're able to find the patterns and find the interestingness in what most other people would just think is random ass bird songs. And so this is how I think about it when it comes to the content that I consume. Because once you become a creator, and once you give yourself permission to use that label, even if you haven't created anything yet, you can still use that label for yourself. Once you've got that internal shift, at that point, everything that we consume becomes stuff that we can steal ideas from, and becomes stuff that we can create. So while to most of the world, scrolling through Twitter looks like scrolling through Twitter, for creators, scrolling through Twitter looks like, let me find as many ideas as I can possibly steal. And it just slightly changes your way of looking at the world. So then you start finding inspiration and start finding influences everywhere. If you're an artist, you start seeing inspiration everywhere in art. If you're a writer, you start seeing the inspiration everywhere. It's that shift from consumer to creator that lets you do this kind of stuff. And so we all have these kind of various places where we consume stuff: Twitter, podcasts, books, articles, physical books, God forbid, Netflix, TV shows. And the way that I think of it is that, okay, anytime I consume something that is worth stealing an idea from, I want to chuck it straight into Notion or into whatever app that I've got, so that I've got it stored as a video idea. And that means that I'm never ever going to run out of ideas to make videos about because, Twitter, for example, has an endless feed. There are endless numbers of podcasts and books and articles and Netflix shows and stuff being created. I will always have a source of ideas. I've got a video called The Magical Insight Logging Framework. It talks about how you can automatically capture things from Kindle highlights, from Instapaper highlights, podcast highlights, chuck them into an app called Readwise, chuck them into Notion. I'm sure someone will link that in the chat if they feel like it. But I want to kind of show you a live demo of what this looks like. So I'm basically going to go, so I've got my kind of video ideas page on Notion, which I've made just for this. And we're going to see if we can kind of come up with some video ideas purely based on scrolling through my feed on Twitter. Here we go. Here's one. Mark Spuntov. I have no idea who this guy is. But do you journal? If so, what are the benefits and what's your process for journaling? Okay, that's kind of interesting. So potentially video about trying journaling. And I'll just paste a thing to that tweet. Great. So we've got one idea already from my Twitter feed. Oh, hello, David Perell. Here's Ed Sheeran, I think you mean. Your early writing will be like dirty water. The more you write, your cleaner your creative water will be. That is an interesting tweet that I would look at that and think, okay. Oh, hello. It's part of a thread. Imitate, then innovate. Oh, I can literally steal that completely, completely wholesale. Imitate, then innovate. But I'd be thinking about, okay, what's the title of that video going to be? The secret to creativity. The secret, I don't know, to consistent content. I wouldn't call it imitate then innovate, because on YouTube a title like that probably won't work. But basically, David has created for me a lovely blog post, which he has then turned into a Twitter thread. And I can literally just go through his Twitter thread and just apply my own spin to it. I can use that concept of imitate and then innovate. And I can talk about how, as a YouTuber, basically I was trying to imitate Peter McKinnon. I can talk about how I wanted to be the Peter McKinnon of med school. I can talk about how, therefore, I started changing my personality and trying to be a bit more charismatic on camera and starting using words like waste man and incorporating coffee into my vlogs and all these things. And now, over the last three and a half years of doing this, I've managed to find my own style. But it came from imitation originally. And then, thanks to David Perell on his Twitter account giving me all these sources, I can just, oh, great, look at this. Oh, no, that's from me. I can use this Ed Sheeran quote. I can use this thing from Julian Shapiro. I can use everything that David has very kindly collated for me. And obviously, I'll give him a hat tip and say, hey, sign up to Rite of Passage, affiliate link in the video description. But the point is, I'm basically stealing from David, and he's just appeared on my Twitter feed. Let's find someone else. Kindness of people. Aha, James Clear. The more you move, the easier it is to keep moving. Maintain the momentum. Interesting idea. I can't think off the top of my head what that would become a video about, but stumbling on happiness, left or right. Everything in life is remix, find things to combine. Yeah. Okay, when you follow someone on Twitter, you choose who influences your thinking. Here are people I'm testing out this month. That's an interesting idea. That's an idea about sort of curating an information diet. And then I can talk about how sort of being selective about Twitter follows, podcasts, books, articles, helps me be the person I want and create the stuff I want. And I can link to his tweet. And now I know when it comes to making a video about this, I will have Julian's tweet that says it. So you guys kind of get the idea. This is the birdsong technique. This is literally, I've scrolled about through 20 tweets on my timeline. I haven't prepared this, and because of the people that I follow, I have just stumbled across like 4 different video ideas, and this one about imitate and innovate could probably become part of my course as well. All of these could definitely be email newsletters. I can definitely talk about these on my podcast. If I wanted to do a video about journaling, that could be a fun video called I tried bullet journaling for 30 days, or my bullet journaling experiment, or experimenting with different journaling techniques. And I'm literally just making the stuff up on the fly. But you'll see that I've got that from just scrolling through Twitter for literally a few seconds. So that is kind of the birdsong technique. And, I use that not just with Twitter, but any article that I read, any podcast I listen to. I'm always, one bit of my mind is absorbing the stuff, and the other bit of my mind is thinking, okay, what are the ideas from here that I can steal for my own content? The final bit that I want to talk about is this idea of coal mining, which is basically the same thing. It's just a little bit more active. So the birdsong technique is like if I happen to stumble across something while scrolling Twitter, I'll steal the idea from them. But coal mining is really a more active and deliberate way of stealing ideas from people. Again, I'm going to quote a screenshot from Austin Kleon. Start copying what you love. Copy, 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 copy. At the end of the copy, you will find yourself. Nobody is born with a style of voice. We don't come out of the womb knowing who we are. In the beginning, we learn by pretending to be our heroes. We learn by copying. We're talking about practice here, not plagiarism. Plagiarism is trying to pass someone else's work off as your own. Copying is about reverse engineering. It's like a mechanic taking apart a car to see how it works. The writer Wilson Misner said, if you copy from one author, it's plagiarism, but if you copy from many, it's research. I once heard the cartoonist Gary Panter say, if you have one person you're influenced by, everyone will say you're the next whoever. But if you rip off 100 people, everyone will say you're so original. And so the way I think about it is, where are the hotspots on the internet or elsewhere? You know, the books, the articles, the resources. I'm reading this fantastic book called Meanings of Life by Roy Baumeister right now. This was written 30 years ago. This is a fantastic source of mining for content for my book and for my videos. Rereading the 4-Hour Workweek. It's a bit cliche, it's been done, but I'm making a video about it, doing a little book summary. But usually when it comes to coal mining, the way I do it is, if I stumble across a blog or something where I think, oh my God, I love this person's writing, or I love the topic that they're writing about, or this would resonate with my audience, then I think, okay, I'm going to save this as a resource and I'm going to start stealing ideas from it. And in fact, if I show you, do I have a page where I've listed all the people that I want to steal from? No, not that. Come on. Where is it? Never mind. One of them is nestlabs.com. This is written by my friend Anne Lore, and her articles are amazing. They're about all the stuff I care about: better thinking, mindful productivity, purposeful creativity, meaningful living, healthy mind, wonderful brain, tools for thought. You know what? If I ever need an article for a video, are we too busy? From productivity porn to mindful productivity. That looks like a good article that I can steal from. Here we go. Let's have a look at that. And, you know, this is a fantastic sort of hotspot. It's a coal mine of like amazing ideas, where she's written hundreds and hundreds of amazing blog posts all about productivity and mindful productivity, magic bullets for superhumans, the stuff for 4-Hour Workweek she references, insidious form of procrastination, mindful productivity for humans. Usually what I do when I steal an idea from someone is that I will look at the title and I will look at the subheadings of their piece, but I won't actually read it. And so what is this? From productivity porn to mindful productivity. Okay, so I probably wouldn't title that a YouTube video like that. My title would probably to be the problem with productivity, or the why I hate productivity, why productivity is overrated. Excuse the all caps. This is just the sort of thing that works on YouTube. It's a bit cringe, I know. I cringe internally and externally every time I use all caps in a title. But I could very easily do a video about why productivity is overrated. Let's see, what's Anne Lore talking about? Magic bullets for superhumans, insidious form of procrastination. Oh, I love that. Insidious procrastination. And I can talk about my shiny new app syndrome and about how this obsession we all have about, like, you know, getting into a frenzy about the most recent note-taking app is actually just procrastination. And we can talk about, I don't know, toxic productivity. We can bring some stuff into there. And so I just went on her website. I was like, you know what? I need an idea for a video. La-di-da-di-da. Let me just pick something completely random. The Pygmalion effect. I've heard of that, but I don't know what it is. You know what? Why don't I do a video about the Pygmalion effect? And I will, I don't know, Pygmalion effect. Let's Google it. What is it? High expectations lead to improved performance in a given area. Great. Okay. Let's see. What's Anne Lore writing about it? Her website's being slow. Never mind. And I could easily do a video about the Pygmalion effect and how, hey, guys, I've recently come across this thing that I read on nestlabs.com. So giving her credit and linking to her article and being like, this is a great blog, one of my favorites, bloody blah. She's happy because I'm giving her loads of traffic. I'm happy because I've just stolen an idea from her. But then I'm phrasing it in my own way. And I'm trying to find stories in my life where high expectations lead to improved performance. For example, one that just randomly comes to mind is when I work as a doctor and my senior registrar is off sick and I have to act up and I have to be responsible for the patients. That actually makes me perform better because now I don't have an excuse. I just have to do it because they're off sick and there's no one else who's going to do it. And that's probably an example of the Pygmalion effect. And so I've stolen an idea from Anne Lore. I've applied a story for myself. I've Google defined it. And I could build a sort of 10-minute, 15-minute compelling video off the back of just these two things. Other websites that I like, Barking Up the Wrong Tree is a great one. Eric Barker's blog. You know, literally any of these will be like 6 things the most productive people do every day. I can literally rip that off and say 5 things the most productive people do each day. And then I can make my own list of 5 and think about, okay, what would those 5 be? But I've got Eric Barker's article if I ever want to return to it. And so hopefully that's given you a bit of an idea about how we apply these concepts of stealing like an artist and just like being like shamelessly stealing ideas from other people, but crucially applying our own lens to them, using examples from our own life and just saying them in a way that's like true to ourselves. And in the last like 10 minutes, we've just created 8 different video ideas. And this is content for me for my YouTube channel sorted for the next month if I publish 2 videos a week. So this is kind of this idea of curating your content diet in a way that the stuff you come across is the stuff that you can write about. And one thing I'm trying to get better at personally is, you know, trying to diversify the originality or the obscurity of my sources. Because I think one problem I personally have is that most of the stuff I read, as David said, it was generated in the last, for me, probably not 24 hours, but more like in the last 12 months. This is 1991 is the oldest book I've read in a very long time, and there's so many amazing ideas in it. So one thing I'm actively trying to do is trying to find things that are older and more, you know, more off the beaten track than, for example, you know, a popular productivity blog like Lifehacker, where I feel like now I'm at the point where I should probably be trying to make make the sources that I use more obscure. But if you're just getting started out, you've seen how we've literally just created 8 video ideas off the back of browsing Twitter for 5 minutes and stealing ideas from Nest Labs for 5 minutes. It's all very easy to do. And, you know, this thing of, I don't have original ideas, I don't know what to make videos about, I don't know what to write about, it holds so many people back. And there's no need for it, because you can just generate endless ideas. And then the lens that you give to those ideas is what makes them unique. So those were 3 components of the idea generation machine. And yeah, that's me done. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this. And thanks, David, for having me on this webinar.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to sort of mention is that there are sort of different levels to this, and the amount, sort of the cadence of how you borrow ideas, I think really impacts just the cadence of your life and how often you want to create things. I've been working on one single essay for the last 9 months, and I've just been churning through it over and over and over with conversations, with just draft after draft. I'm probably on my 6th or 7th draft of about a 15 to 20,000 word essay. I actually had dinner with Will, who is one of our panelists, and this was probably in November or October, and he was like, dude, the essay is awesome. It is now 5 months later, I'm still working on this thing. And I think that what Ali said, you know, is a certain kind of creativity where you just want to be churning stuff out all the time, where it's your job, like this is your livelihood. But if you then want to sort of think deeper and sort of produce ideas that like are more a byproduct of like your own experiences, know that they're going to take longer, but know that you can pull a lot of these principles in order to do that. And I strongly encourage you as a creator to try both. Try on one lens, you're going to borrow from a lot of other people. You're going to think about, okay, how do I sort of cross and remix like exactly what I need? That works really well. Like if you're at your job and your boss comes up to you and says, hey, I need something from you in 3 hours. Now, what Ollie just did will tell you exactly how to do that. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is like, I'm trying to figure out how to save the liberal arts. It's a huge project. Every single answer that has been given is, in my opinion, unsatisfactory. This is a very important problem that is more important to me than my work. And I can use the skills that I learned from my work to go out and come up with a solution. And because of that, I've been spending 9 months and probably will end up spending a whole year on this essay, just working through all the nitty gritty. So for those of you who feel like, you know what, I'm not going to produce something every day, I don't want to work that fast. Like every single person has a different cadence, and each project has its different cadence. And you don't want the project to serve the method. You want the method to serve the project. And as you get good at both sides of the spectrum, then you'll figure out how your personality and how you're basically just what you're working on, how you need to adapt that to the ideas that we've spoken about today.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Like it's an area where I definitely want to improve, because I think like for me, for the last kind of 3.5 years, it's been a case of how do I basically make easy content that I can put out on YouTube and do it at a rate of 3 times per week while working a full-time job as a doctor. And my brother often picks me up on this. He's like, dude, why are you just parroting the same stuff that everyone else is parroting? And I'm like, because it works. And that is my goal in the short term. But now, as I'm writing this book about meaningful productivity, and I want to become I want to have my own original insights and that kind of stuff, I'm now shifting gears a little bit and moving away from the let me rip off a random idea from a blog and just present it as my own, and more towards the, okay, let's actually go back to the original sources. Let's dive deep into the studies that have been done around this that no one's looking at, and let's try and find some original insight. So I think there is absolutely that balance to be had between publishing frequency like a machine and generating original ideas. And I think, yeah, somewhere in the middle is ideal.
Yeah, and we can move into Q&A after this, so we can just do a couple questions. But, a lot of people look at, for example, I was very influenced by a guy named Marshall McLuhan. Marshall McLuhan wrote in the 1960s. And what I do when I discover somebody whose writing I really admire is I pick up the books that have influenced them. And what I realized is often these things just also happen on different timescales. Marshall McLuhan, in his books, he has hundreds of citations. And he is building upon different books that he's read. I once counted the number of citations in Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. It's about 550. 550 citations. But then, when you go and you actually read people's influences, in some way they lose some of their magic. And, I think that what Ali and I are trying to say here is, yes, there is an element of creativity. Like if you take the word genius, right? You know what the etymology of the word genius is? It's genie. And this goes back to the Roman times where people literally thought that a genie would fly into the creator's studio and would basically endow them with creative ideas as like a gift. And that genie would then contribute to their genius. And you have that on one side, which is this sort of effervescent, magical genius. And there's an element of that. But there's the other element of genius of like, Ali and I do this. And there are certain things that you can do to make your life as a creator much easier. And go back. I encourage you, find your favorite people and study them. Find your Wes Anderson to the Casey Neistat. In my case, I went and with Marshall McLuhan, I'm now reading all of Lewis Mumford's work to say, okay, how did McLuhan actually build up to these ideas? And same thing with Nassim Taleb. I went back and studied Benoit Mandelbrot, and I said, wow, these ideas are just taking these ideas, translating them, and adapting them to a new age. That is how a lot of nonfiction creativity is. Will.
All right, guys. First question. When you're coming up with all these different ideas, any tips for prioritizing your ideas and deciding which videos or essays to work on first? There's this concept of idea overload or indecision about where to start. So we'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
Mine is very unsatisfactory. I just pick what I'm most excited about in the moment. I think if I'm excited about it, I look through my ideas. I'm like, you know what? It would be really fun to do a video about journaling today. Let me do that one. Nothing particularly fancy to it.
I'm the same way. I write about what I'm excited about, and I get hyped about ideas, but I just gotta execute on them right away.
Perfect. Next question. In addition to a lack of consistency and a lack of persistence, what are other biggest mistakes that aspiring creators, writers, YouTubers tend to make?
On the YouTuber front, not thinking enough about titles and thumbnails. Literally the most important thing. We all hate paying attention to it, especially if you're an intellectual and you're like, oh, I don't want to have to think about titles and thumbnails. It's all clickbait anyway. And oh, I don't want to have to use caps in my titles because that's clickbait and cringe. I used to be like that for about 2 years before I realized, oh my god, if you don't get the click, they don't get a chance to see how amazingly well crafted your video is. So title and thumbnail all the way for me.
Yeah, I laughed really hard in Ollie's presentation when he talked about the cringeness of all caps. I was cracking up. And every artist, every creator, you serve two mediums. You serve two masters. You serve the medium and you serve the work. And when you serve the medium, you say, what does this medium need from me? How do I need to optimize my work? And you have to know that when you're a creator, then there's the other side, and there's the art, and there is what the art wants. And every time you do something, especially if you do this for a job, you do this because you want something, you got to think about where on this spectrum do I want to fall? And some artists, they're uncompromising in their commitment to the art, but it can be hard to make a living if you do that. Other artists are uncompromising in their commitment to the medium, and they're not artists. They're just hyper optimized automatons who are just mostly uninteresting. And so as creators, we have to grapple with this spectrum. And once you make that trade-off conscious, then you can think clearly about where on the spectrum you want to be.
So we had a question in the chat. Somebody just sort of stream of consciousness said something like, gosh, so you're churning out all this content, but is there any meaning behind it all? Or are you just making content for the sake of it, just to get more followers? And can you guys talk about what you see as the purpose behind this all, and what you guys see as maybe a higher sense of mission, or how do you see that question from?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak to this. I mean, look, there's a couple things. There is, first of all, just the ability, I want to be the best essayist in the entire world. And that is my goal. I want to get to a place where I spend decades and my essays are just absolutely exceptional. And for me, it's all about the long form essay. That to me is a beautiful craft. And I want to get good at that long form essay in video. And I want to get good at that long form essay in writing. And I want to be absolutely exceptional at it. So that's my end goal. And that to me is a very noble mission. It's exciting and it psychs me up. I love that. But in order to get there, there are things that I need to do. I need to be able to fund my life so that, and in order to do that, I have a business. I have people who work for me who I need to support. I have healthcare to pay and stuff like that. That's the first thing. The second thing is I need the time and the space and the energy to do this work that is extremely important to me. And so what I do is I've built a life where I say, how do I work really hard 5 months out of the year? So I have 7 months out of the year that I can write these truly outstanding essays and get to a place that over years and over decades, I can hone this craft so that I can make myself proud and I can admire my own work. And that goal to me makes life worth living. It's just a beautiful challenge that I've signed up for each and every day.
So it's really interesting that you say that. So, because I feel like I don't have any kind of long-term, any goal like that. My thing is more that I think the thing that gives me the most meaning is teaching others. And what I've found is that, in the way that I make videos, it's something like I'm going to film a video tomorrow doing explaining, doing a summary of the 4-hour work week. In my mind, I would be tempted to say this is meaningless content because it's been summarized before. It's been out since 2007. Lots of people in the chat who are familiar with the book be like, oh God, you're just adding to the miasma of content around the 4-hour work week and hustle lifestyle and blah, blah, blah. But that video is going to get 200,000 views, maybe more than that. And for a large percentage of that audience, it will be the first time they're hearing of the 4-hour work week. It'll be the first time they're hearing of Tim Ferriss. And this is genuinely the book that's most changed my life out of anything that I've ever read. And if even a handful of people, if even one person can have the response to this book that I did, it just completely transforms the trajectory of your life as it did for me. And so it reminds me of something that Derek Sivers says, which is what's obvious to you can be amazing to others. And I used to not really buy into this, but now the more I've made videos and seen comments on things where I'm like, in my mind, I feel, oh God, this was just a throwaway video I made purely to churn the content machine. But it's resonated with loads of people, and I'm like, damn, maybe I'm not the best judge of what is what's content worth making. And so I try to think about the fact that there are going to be people that have never come across this stuff before, even if I internally feel that, oh, this is kind of cheating.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that when it comes to Ali, like I think it's important for all of us to say what do we have that the world needs from us? And I mean, when I look at my studio, the lights, I have a big light here, I have a microphone here, I have a camera here, I got a lens, I have another light here. I have a whole system for YouTube that I've built. And this was very simple for Ali. But I went through his course, Part-Time YouTuber Academy, and every single thing that I'm looking at in here, every single video that I create is because of my time and a student of the course. And so the things that you make, which can be obvious to you, but if you know that other people are interested in those ideas, they can be transformative for other people. And it's because of Ali that I'm able to do YouTube at such a high level.
All right, guys, last question. I like the wording on this one. How do you manage your inner saboteur when you lose confidence in your idea before you even get anywhere? And specifically, I want you guys to talk about when you were starting out. David, when you were making those early YouTube videos or writing your first essays without an audience. Ali, when it was June 2017 and you had that flat line on the graph. How did you manage your inner saboteur, especially at the beginning?
So my tactic for this was kind of twofold. One was that, and I said this in my very first vlog, that look, even if no one watches this, at the very least, it will be a good memory for me to look back on, and my grandma who's in Pakistan will appreciate seeing my face on video and seeing what's up with my life. And so I just lowered the stakes so much. I was like, you know what, worst case scenario, I get a bunch of memories and it's nice to look back on. And the second thing was that the main thing I was thinking was, I'm going to document, I'm not going to create. And this is something that Gary Vaynerchuk talks about a lot. I think for me, the thought of creating felt very like, oh, you have to create something, and that's hard because you've got to be original and good and stuff. Whereas documenting, which is like, hey guys, here is how I take notes on my iPad. Hey guys, here is how I manage my to-do list. Hey guys, here is what I thought about this book by Tim Ferriss. Even to this day, you know, I silence the inner saboteur by thinking, you know what, I'm just documenting. My vibe is, this kind of works for me. Maybe you'll like it. If it works for you, go and try it, see what happens. I'm not trying to be a guru, not trying to be an expert in anything. There's actually a phrase that my writing coach recently said, which is that you want to be a guide rather than a guru. A guide is someone who's on the same journey as the audience, and maybe is, you know, maybe one step ahead, maybe just walking alongside. A guru is someone who comes down from the mountain with all the answers. And it's really hard to be a guru, but it's very easy to be a guide. And so those are the things that I use to silence the inner saboteur.
My answer is a little different. I mean, when I started writing, I actually just followed what I did when I started working out, where working out was really hard for me. I grew up pretty skinny, and I had it very much in my identity that I was going to be skinny, that I wasn't going to have a lot of muscle. And that really bothered me for a lot of years. And when I was in college, people used to make fun of me. When I was in high school, when I was growing up, I was just bullied really bad. And it sucked. Like, it really sucked. And I had to get out of that. And when I was in college, I had a friend, his name was Jamie. And Jamie was a year older than me, and he pulled me to the gym. And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, it doesn't matter how hard you go when you do it. What matters is that you do it every day. And so what I did was I went to the gym every single day, and I actually set a 30-minute time limit where after 30 minutes I had to leave. And so rather than going and trying to just become ripped in one session, I said none of my sessions are actually going to be that impactful, but I'm going to make sure that I never miss a day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I went to the gym no matter what. And I never missed a day. And all that mattered was that I walked into the gym, then I got the checkbox. And I'm not like ripped now, but I don't struggle with a lot of the issues that I used to have. I don't have the self-image issues that I grew up with, and I'm really proud of that. And when I started writing, something very similar happened, which was I wanted to be the equivalent of ripped, and I didn't know how to get there. And so what I said was, rather than trying to write the next great American novel in one day, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to show up every single day. And I write every day. There's not a day that I miss. This is a craft. It is a way of life. And I am dedicated to this like any ordinary professional would be. And when you make a commitment to creative work, you show up, no matter how you feel, and you do your work. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. We will send you a full recording via email, notes and all. And on the behalf of Ali and myself, thank you very much for joining us today. It is a real honor to be able to share this time with you.
Thanks, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Bye, everybody.
See you later.